If you're coming from the perspective of an author, I would first determine who you're writing your book for. Because, like you and I've discussed before, you're not necessarily writing a book for 10,000 people, you're writing it for the one. So, who is the one? What does that person look like?
Hey everyone, it's Jen Foster here with the Elite Publishing Podcast. We're really excited to have Chloe Williamson here with us. She is a podcast marketing specialist, and she helps authors and other people in the health and wellness industry, as well as business owners, get on podcasts and get booked. So welcome, Chloe.
Hi, Jen. Thanks so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Tell us a little bit about why it's so important to have a podcast tour or to be booked on podcasts when you have a book.
Well, number one, it's like a free little preview into the book before anyone buys it. That probably is obvious to anyone, but similar to how Google will give you that like 3-page preview of a book, a podcast interview is also a preview that you can give to potential buyers. And you can really kind of hone in on what the major takeaways are without having to have them read it. I know ultimately we want them to read it, but people are always going to judge book by the cover. I know we're not supposed to, but that's the way it is. And if you give them kind of a taste of what they're going to be getting out of it, they're more likely to make an informed purchase there. So I think it's a really great way to boast about yourself, first of all, because if you're writing a book, you have to believe in yourself. Even if you don't, you should. And talking the talk about what it is that you're offering in that book, whether it be advice, information, anything, that's a really good way to back up that you are the authority and that what you have written in this book is valuable content that a listener could then become a reader.
Yeah, I love that. And I think there's like working with some of the authors that we've worked with, there's fiction, nonfiction. And I know some authors are kind of like, I don't want to be the face. Like, I don't want to show my face. I don't want people to know too much about me. But they're kind of doing themselves a big disservice because they're not doing that. Now, I know there's podcasts that don't show your face that are just audio, but not being on podcasts or not putting yourself out there is making it so you have less readers. So why wouldn't you do that, right?
Exactly.
Tell us a little bit more about like, how do you go about getting booked on a podcast or finding the right audience to what podcast would you be on, right?
If you're coming from the perspective of an author, I would first determine who you're writing your book for. Because, like you and I've discussed before, you're not necessarily writing a book for 10,000 people, you're writing it for the one. So, who is the one? What does that person look like? And then try to break that down into demographics. I know it's hard to see an idealized abstract version in terms of demographics, but you kind of have to strip it down like that. Mm-hmm. And what are those people listening to? What are they consuming? Whether that be any media, TV, books, music, art, it doesn't matter. What are they listening to, and how can you get in on whatever that is to become relevant and get in their peripheral vision with that? And again, it's just a lot of research. You're going to have to kind of determine that. But if you're publishing a book, there should be some level of research anyway, especially in terms of your rollout. So you probably already have access to that information. You just need to know how to apply it into getting on the right podcast.
Right. I love that your company, I know you're with Interview Valet, actually helps you do that marketing research. So it's not like you're just going in blind. I mean, like, I'm on this, book club podcast and I hope their readers like it. It's like, well, do you know what kind of books they read, right? Like what kind of a book club is it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So tell us more a little bit about the marketing and your services that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So the number one thing that we do is we identify that target audience. So if you simply can't do it, trust me, we can do it for you. We have access to a lot of data and we deploy it strategically to make sure we're putting you in the right place. We help identify your goals. Obviously, the goal is book sales, but sometimes it needs to go deeper than that because, again, if you're trying to assert yourself as a thought leader or as, with brand authority, we have to know what it is you're trying to do so we can work backwards from that. And then we help with promotional efforts. So we can help repurpose that interview into, slogans, reels, quote cards, images, anything like that. And it's evergreen content. It's just going to keep going, especially if you're on an actual book tour. I mean, you're going to be doing interviews anyway, but a podcast interview, you can keep repurposing time and time again, even as the book. Obviously, the book's always going to be relevant, but if you come out with a new edition, I mean, that podcast interview could still be the same the same meaningful content. So it's just gonna keep flourishing beyond whatever you thought it was in the first place. And then
Right.
another thing that is really helpful for authors, I find that a lot of times authors that I've worked with really are interested in organically building a community, whether that be through their publishing company or through whatever niches are surrounding that publishing company, which I think is great, because I think that proves that, you believe in what you're doing and you want to stay aligned with that sort of branding. So we can help you do that too, because it's going to be literal word of mouth, because you're talking on an interview to the right people. And it's nice for people who maybe want to move away from social media, which I do find sometimes in my area, a lot of people are trying to move away from it. They're getting less intrinsic value from it. So an interview is a really good way to actually promote what you're doing without having to make an Instagram post if that's not your thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think the cool thing about podcasting, like you were talking about the content and creating the reels and those kind of things, most authors, if they are an established author, have a website. And when you have a website, you can do a blog, which gives you more content, right? So having your
Yes.
podcast interview is actually turns into a blog post. And then you have your reels, and then you have all this content created from just one interview. And then when you do multiple interviews, you're creating a lot of content to get a lot more readers. Because a lot of times, we'll have authors come to us that are so excited to get their book published because they think they're done, and they forget that now the marketing starts. So the podcast tours, being on the podcast and having that content so that when people are searching a specific genre of book or a specific subject, if it's health and wellness, or if it's, how to train your dog, whatever it is, that your podcasts are going to come up, and then they're going to find your book, and then you're going to get more sales and get more clients from those sales. So I really think that podcasting is like the number one in marketing with when you're an author.
I think so too, especially if you're not in the market to do a fully fleshed out book tour. I mean, this is kind of the same thing. You may not be being interviewed on like a news station, but it's still an interview, and that meaningful content is still going to have the same impact, even if it's not majorly broadcast, because it's all about how you use it, right? So your words have power, and an interview is the best way to put that power out there. Plus, this is, I'm mostly being silly here, but if you're getting on podcast interviews to promote your book, that host is going to read your book. So that's at least one buyer that you got right there. So you're already making an impact.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, actually, the relationships you make on podcasts. One of my best friends, I interviewed on a podcast like the second year we were podcasting. So we've been friends now for like 8 years, and we go on cruises together and do all this stuff because she was new to town, and I invited her to a bunch of women in business conference things, and we just hit it off. So you never know what podcasting can do for you. And we've got clients from podcasting. There's so many things you can get from being on a podcast interview and just talking to the people. And I love talking with people all over the world, right? Like you'll get interviews from all over the place. So I love that.
Yep. And it's leveraging that person's audience to then become your audience. It's a mutually beneficial thing, both for you and the host and the reader. There you go. It's a whole other channel of who's benefiting from this, because everyone can get something out of it. Especially if you have something to say, you might as well say it. So an interview is a really, really good way to do that.
Yeah, I love the story of Jack Canfield. I don't know if you guys know him with Chicken Soup for the Soul, but he was like, I just need 1 million readers, because he only made $1 a book or something like that. And his story is like, I just need 1 million readers, so I don't know, where am I going to find 1 million people to buy my book? And then when he was checking out of the grocery store, he saw like the National Enquirer or something like that. I saw, and he was like, oh, they have 1 million readers. So he was like, oh, they have an audience of 1 million people. And then he got however he got in with the National Enquirer, and he did. He sold 1 million books. He sold more than 1 million books. Right now, he has multiple books. But I love that story because he utilized someone else's audience, which is what you do when you're podcasting. You're finding whose audience you want to leverage, and then you're being on their show, and you're getting all of their people to see you. So I love that.
Yeah, because there's whole audiences you may not even know are the audience for you, but through the journey, you're just expanding your reach, and you're finding out more, and you're just opening up a world of more possibilities for more people to buy your book.
Yes, exactly. Well, tell us more about how people can find you and get booked on podcasts, and how that process would look like.
You can find me. Go to interviewvalet.com/Chloe. That's my personal landing page. You can see more interviews I've done where I've discussed things like this if you want some more information. There is also a ton of free resources available on our website, interviewvalet.com, where you can find out how to leverage podcast guesting to amplify your voice, expand your orbit. You can learn about promotional. There's even information on like current data on podcasts, just the podcast industry in general. If you want to get a little more inside baseball, we have anything like that too. We have webinars. There's a million different things. And if you're interested enough, there's also a link on there to book a discovery call with us. If you think that podcast interview marketing can help you, we are more than happy to help you back.
Awesome. I love that. Well, we'll put the link up in the show notes. And of course, you can always go to our website, eliteonlinepublishing.com. On our partners page, we have Interview Valet. We've been using them, like I said, for a while now. So check that out. Check out the show notes. Make sure you like and subscribe to this podcast and share it with someone who you know would love it. And we wish you success on your book and on all your marketing efforts. Talk to you soon.
If you want to write a book and become a best-selling author, you're in the right place. At Elite Online Publishing, we can help you create, publish, and market your book so that it becomes a #1 bestseller. We work with a limited number of authors to ensure that they receive the best possible service. So if you want to learn how to write and publish a book that will empower you to smartly grow your brand, business, and credibility, apply today. We look forward to working with you.